Everybody, welcome back to Kicks Over Coffee. I have my friend Jason Robertson on with me. Jason is not a stranger to Kicks Over Coffee, Shoe and Show, our many events at FDRA, and we appreciate his support, Evoco support. I'm actually wearing their insoles right now, Jason, the Fates. So we can talk a little bit about that too. But welcome back to the show. Just want to start off really quickly with, what you're seeing with footwear companies and what you guys are doing right now in terms of innovation, because we always say Evoco is an innovation company that serves footwear companies. So what are you seeing right now? What are you guys launching? What are you guys doing that's really exciting that you want to share?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me, and pleasure to have a coffee, even virtually, but thanks for inviting me. Evoco, well, it is interesting times, and but I'm going to say navigating those times, and part of that is because of the type of technology we're working on, being a plant-based eco foam that is pretty diverse in its application along the footwear value chain. And we continue to try to innovate beyond that. So one of the things we've launched is a open cell blocker type sheet stock material that is more ubiquitous in the industry, right? It's something that you find in running shoes and a variety of applications. And we used to use kind of a more casting poured product, and that really fit our technology, but we had to diversify, knowing that the industry has a segment for that type of product, but we want to really get the product out there to make an impact. And we always talk about the impact of our product is not on selling one insole, it's selling millions and millions of components. And I think that's where we've been quite successful, in that diversification of that technology is going to allow us to really kind of expand not only the Fates EcoFoam product line category, but continue to reinvest in new innovations coming out, like a plant-based leather alternative, and other products that we have on the pipeline, like TPU and coatings and adhesives, all can be applied in various aspects of the footwear industry.
That's great, because that's always the big question that everybody has. It's like, all right, so this is a bio product, this is a sustainable material. Can it scale, right? That's the one. What's the cost and can it scale? And I think you're solving one of the problems there, where it's like, all right, like let's figure this out to where it's not just a molded insole, but like let's provide it to where the brand can figure out how to best use it where they need to use it, right?
Yeah, and it's trying to target a larger section of the marketplace, and the impact is going to be numbers of units, not mass or volume of units. Like, right. And so when we get into the midsole category, or even potentially the outsole category, as we move forward, that's going to take up more of the weight of the shoe, have greater impact going forward, but smaller amount of units. So we kind of look at our carbon impact on these technologies, and that's something we keep in the background of what we're doing all the time, right? But we also have to look at what our customers want and need at this time as well. So we can't always directionally push them towards what we want to do or what we need to do or what we're able to do right now. We have to adopt to the market. And I think that's one of the things Evoco's always done over the last 8 years, navigating various aspects of the economy and the industry.
Yeah. So the insoles are 70-80% bio-based content, right? Super high bio-based content. Credit to your innovation team. Is it going to be equal to that kind of high number for bio if you're looking at like midsoles, outsoles, or is it just going to be lower and then scale up? How do you look at what that means for other components?
Yeah, we kind of set an internal bar where we're not really going below this 60% bio number. And it's more because we need to differentiate ourselves. Firstly, we believe in what we're doing, and we know that 60% is a carbon reducing, detoxified technology that, when you look at it from a life cycle perspective or a carbon reduction perspective, is going to make an impact against the status quo of the materials you're using today, right? And we want to continue that momentum. And I think that's where our value prop is much different. I think there's other people out there, not to knock people, but other technologies out there that are, working on lower bio content, working on technology that may be going into a variety of different SKUs. But what we're trying to do is really push the boundaries on sustainability. That's where we add our innovation platform. So we're not looking at one ingredient. We look at multiple ingredients. We don't look at one feedstock. We look at multiple feedstocks, and we look at regional diversity of those feedstocks and chemistry you can do. So we can have different chemistry in Europe, which we're also starting up production in as well as in China versus Vietnam in our own factory. So it's really important to kind of just, always perceive Evoco as this innovation hub that really can drive sustainability for the materials. And maybe we're not going to be able to offer you the cheapest, most sustainable product. We're going to be offering a premium product that is quantitatively, transparently sustainable, whatever measurement you may want to look at.
Yeah. Well, if we could get anywhere close to 60% for midsole, outsole, what a win that would be for footwear, because we constantly talk about how difficult that is because of that's, just common sense. It's where our feet hit the ground, right? And press against it. It's got to bounce up. And that's traditionally been like the barrier to, and the heaviest part of the shoe really is solving that. So I'm super excited to see as you guys keep evolving that and innovating that space, what that will mean for footwear. But I think it, just thinking about that, and people are listening and watching, like you need to be aware of that, because that's a huge opportunity to take your scores and your impact scores way down. We had a great conversation the other day with the chief sustainability officer at Nike, and one of his big things was talking about what you were just talking about, which is like a better holistic look at things. Sometimes we get so focused on one area, we have a narrow gaze, and it's really about like how we think about carbon and water and ecosystems and biodiversity and all those things. And I think to your point, you can't like take a round object and keep jamming it into a triangle object and think it's going to work. And so maybe you could share a little bit more about how you're looking at the innovation in different spaces. Like Europe's different than Vietnam versus China. Is that a lot to do with kind of this whole idea of like local for local, finding local feedstock that will work in those environments, and then looking at the markets? Like how do you look at that? What is the calculus for that?
I think firstly, it's a supply chain management thing for us.
Risk.
When we break it down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's really managing supply chain, and that's managing supply chain so we can keep costs down and continue to deliver product to our customers, no short shipping, stuff like that. So it's a really fundamental thing for us. So having that diversity, and it goes back to my roots in clean tech going on 20 years now. And it was always this, well, where do we get our fuel from? Oil, right? And it's one feedstock, one raw material that derivatizes in a whole bunch of different things, including petrochemistry, right? And I think plants give us the opportunity for that diversity, whether it's regional diversity or just product diversity. And I think what we've been able to do with our platform is allow ourselves to, one, create chemistry that's diverse, but also manufacture that chemistry in very diverse ways so we can extend our product line category. So when we look at Europe, there's certain things like REACH that we have to abide by. So we don't want to be importing a lot of stuff, and we don't want to be held up in customs and duties. So we want to source stuff locally. And so that's how we would really look at Europe. And Europe is a different market, right? It's a more fashion-driven market. It's not necessarily performance, albeit that could be changing. And so when we look at that type of product, there's certain aspects that they're looking for that may be different than performance. So we may be driving up more sustainability with that product and moving it to the 85, 90% bio on that product, because that's what they're looking for, willing to pay for it. Where in Vietnam, in our production factory, when we were looking at performance or outdoor or even utility and work, which was a growing sector for us, price is coming into play in there, right? And so it's just really about the holistic management of our business and holistically offering a product to our customers, ensuring that our customers are happy with what we're delivering.
Well, I think it's important to talk about that too, right? Because I think it's people want to work with someone who's innovative, but they also want to work with somebody that's a business person that understands those supply chain issues, risks, and costs. And you explaining that like makes perfect sense. And I think it's a lot of what brands are dealing with too, right? And I know you guys have been in Vietnam for a couple of years now and really ramped up there. And to your point, you know, you're serving what the shoe type that's being made in Vietnam, predominantly in Vietnam, that with the data we see is typically athletic kind of shoes coming out of there. But to your point, in Europe is exactly, I think, spot on. I mean, the consumer is much more conscious than they are in the States. They are willing to pay a little bit more. The product type's a little bit different. Sometimes I think in the States we forget that. But I think that's very interesting about how you can be modular in your business approach to provide value to footwear people. And I think that's a key point that people need to think about is no matter what product type you have as your brand's producing and putting out or whatever, you can go to Evoco and they have an approach that can fill different voids and help you in that space. You know, Jason, one thing too that we should probably talk about is just the difficulty right now in the economic environment and how that might be impacting people's decision making. And my concern is, I know that things are a little bit tighter and that might tighten belts, but people need to realize like you can't, you maybe in this environment, and I'll just say it like more realistically and we can chat about it, but maybe you don't need to push the pedal to the metal like we were previous years on sustainability, but you can't take your foot off the gas either in this environment. You need to keep moving forward and keep building because it is getting harder to find wins. There are opportunities where Evoco and others are coming in and providing more opportunities and things like that. But unless you're looking at it and considering it and getting involved, you know, I just had this whole notion where, you know, we're doing the sustainability summit in Portland, and I know you're coming and you guys have been big supporters, but you can't stop learning and you can't stop moving forward in this space because as soon as you do, you'll fall way far behind other people.
Yeah, and you know, there's some history behind where I come from, and having been through a cycle of sustainability, you know, started in the biofuel sector and was there in the emergence of solar and that sort of thing, and been in clean tech for 20 years. And you did see, you know, this momentum building, and then the Great Recession, you know, the world depressed its financial system essentially, and sustainability took a backstop, right? And I think if this happens again, that'll be to the detriment to all the consumer goods sector, but primarily footwear and fashion, because I believe regulations is on the horizon, and whether we like regulation or not. And I think a lot of these brands, specifically in fashion footwear, need to get ahead of it, right? And you need to be there at the table talking about it, but offering viable solutions, not offering auxiliary solutions with a bit of greenwashing attached to that. It needs to be viable. This is a pathway to reduce our impact on the environment, whether it's toxicity, waste, or carbon, right? And I think if we can start to have these very fruitful, honest, transparent conversations, and the brands being honest about it as well, understanding their impact, but also understanding the solutions, it's not just going to be about, you know, gravitating everything towards adopting absolutely everything across the board, right? It's going to be a pragmatic solution starting today, or probably should have started yesterday, but let's say starting today, and pragmatically introduce. So something as simple as a open cell insole, sock liner, as some people call it, or introducing some product lines with a midsole that's got 60% bio today and maybe 80% tomorrow. But you got to start somewhere and introduce, right? And so, you know, again, I'm not harping on the lack of you know, opportunities. We have a lot of opportunities, but I think what's happening now is, as many opportunities as we're gaining, a lot of these new product line categories that were to be launched are also being canceled or pushed because of the state of the industry, right?
Yeah.
And so what we don't want is, okay, if this is delayed a season or 2 seasons, we don't want it to be canceled, because there's just, it's an opportunity to really clean up your value chain. And so that's what a main message I would put out there. And I think adoption of a variety of technology is important. Yes, Evoco has a high bio content LCA, Higg index. You know, one of the big thing is we put our LCA in the public domain on the Higg index. And I know some people it's unpopular, but we think that transparency is important for the brands. It's a reference point for the brands, but it's also a point where they can start to compare whether they have good data or bad data. At least it's a marker to compare, but also a marker we set in the public to start to continually innovate to reduce our carbon footprint and our impact in selling these materials or products. So this is a good time to start, and maybe it's starting small or growing big. These are the things that we need to kind of think about as we grow our facility. I mean, our Vietnam facility is there to scale 25 million units, right? And we can replicate that. And we're also starting up, we have operations still in China. We're getting operations started in Europe. So we can replicate this across the world and build up this volume. And that's when, you know, if the brand's moving, you know, 50% of their SKUs to bio is when the impact starts happening. It's like, oh, look at my carbon reduction. It's going up and my carbon's going down, right?
Right.
And so these are things that I just think people need to keep in mind as they are canceling new products or they are reducing volume. You know, where can we find low-hanging fruit today to offer different technologies? And I think to kind of end that comment too is, you know, we're not going to recycle our way out of this thing, right? We have to start looking at innovations like ours while still incorporating recycling. I'm not saying don't do it, but you got to think outside of the box if you're really going to address your ESG net zero goals and what you have coming in the future, right? And it's got to be about implementation now, because people have the 5-year plan or the 2030 plan, but if they're going to wait till 2028, they ain't going to do it, right? And so we really got to start moving along now and keeping technology like ours in the back of everybody's mind as they start to introduce new tech, new product, and we're there to help.
Awesome. And I'll chime in here too, because I think on the recycled side, we've seen a lot of companies lean into that. Great. Completely get it. I think the challenge for that is going to be on the traceability side of where the recycled content came from. Do you have the documentation, and then is it verified by a body actually seeing it? And then, you know, like, because that's the big thing, like in Europe. And this is one thing I've been tracking a lot of, Jason, is just what's happening in Europe, because it's a bellwether, or it's going to kind of forecast what's going to happen in the States and elsewhere in the West on what they're leaning on. But they're looking particularly at like plastic bottles going into fashion and footwear. And that's been okay for a while, and it's cleaned up the waters, et cetera, but they're starting at a point where they're saying, well, if we're going to do this circular system, the bottle needs to go back into a bottle. It can't just go into another product. And that becomes what I'm talking to people about. It's getting a little bit harder, and it's going to get harder than you anticipate, right? Because some of those easy things that we grabbed at aren't going to be there. And this is why we keep telling people to lean into bio, because bio ultimately is the win that you can have that does reduce the carbon, it reduces the plastics, it reduces the fossil fuel issues. But increasingly, as we look at like recycling footwear, which is really hard, and as we move towards that circularity, if we ever get there, I'm not sure. I hope we do, but I'm not sure. But it becomes that thing where we start looking at different components and parts and saying what can be recycled, and then what should be like heavily bio-based so it doesn't impact anything if it can't be recycled. So you start to make those like end of life considerations around bio too.
No, and sometimes it's a little bit, I'm going to, you know, not feel sorry for myself, but it's a little bit unfair, the scrutiny you get for being bio and how circular it is, but we tend to forget what we're trying to replace, which is oil, which is a one-way ticket into the atmosphere, right? And it's stuff that's been drilled out of the ground where plants are entirely renewable. So that's the circularity of carbon, right? And whether it biodegrades or can be recycled are secondary issues. But we need to go to the primary source of where our carbon's coming from. If we recycle, like there's a case study I often say, you know, you've got a company growing at 5% year over year CAGR, right? And they're growing and they got more products coming out, and they're recycling 5% or 10% of their products going back in. You're still increasing your amount of petrochemistry and your carbon going forward, right? It's not offsetting that enough. And that's why I use that term. We're not recycling our way out of this.
Yeah.
We should incorporate recycling. Most of the recycling we see today is pre-consumer recycling, which we also do, right? Clean up the shop floor, incorporate it back in where you can, make sure performance is not degraded, and reduce your waste impact. That is helpful. But what we get often misconstrued that a plastic bottle going into a t-shirt, again, is a one-way ticket, right? It doesn't go back into a plastic, it goes into a polyester that ends up in landfill.
Right.
So, yeah, and then you only can burn it at that point, right? And so that's that holistic. And I like that word of looking at things holistically, and how you should try to reduce waste, and we should try to increase the end of life. But we take your eye, when you focus only on circularity, you miss the whole picture of what we're really trying to do, which is reduce our consumption of oil or fossil fuels or fossil-based raw materials into the materials we use in our everyday life. We like to use the word defossilization now, right? It's like we're trying to defossilize the value chain of materials used in fashion, footwear, and then consumer goods, and hopefully one day industrial goods, like automotive and the rest of it. And I think that's a bit of a narrative we need to kind of turn around, because then you look at circularity, recycling, bio, different consumption methods as a whole to the solution, and not just one part of it, right? Not one ingredient, not one method of recycling. It's looking at everything. And I think that's where the narrative needs to change, and needs to start in the footwear, because they can be leaders in this space. They can show the rest of the consumer goods sector that it can be done with a bit of ingenuity, innovation, and hard work. That's what it's going to take to get ourselves out of this thing, and not just simply look at one simple solution, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about it. As much of the difficulties that we have, I'm always excited to talk to folks like you that are innovating and are encouraging and telling people you can do this. We can do this. Like, it's possible. We just have to be willing, right? It's the attitude of saying, let's try it. Let's jump in and see what we can do step by step, better by better. I'm excited about the new stuff that you guys are working on, but also the stuff you're launching now around providing more options based on the entire shoe, looking at, not just the insoles and everything, but like looking at different parts to solve those problems. Cause I think that is the challenge of footwear is, we've got somewhere between 60 and 120 different materials and components in a shoe. And there's a lot of places that we don't even think about sometimes, even designers, designers might design the out and the visual aspect. And then the engineer comes in and they're like, oh my God, we got to get backing. We got to get, this has got to be like things that people don't even think about. And so there's a lot of opportunities that I think people have worked on packaging. They've worked on insoles. Maybe some people still need to work on insoles. They've worked on this, they've worked on that, but like now we're at the point where it's like, okay, there's some other things that you can work on too, and keep going forward and keep trying different things. And again, not taking your foot off the gas. Keep it steady, maybe don't burn all the gas or energy or electric battery or whatever it is that you're driving.
It's a light deceleration. It's like a acceleration off the stop sign, not kind of like we're gunning it on the
right
in a race or something, But
I also think like people need to consider, like, all right, like I get it if you have like economic issues and you need to like, keep steady and not. But the flip side is like, that's when you lean into your learnings.
Yeah.
I always tell people, like, when we do these things, it's like, all right, like, just call up Jason and talk to him. Call up Evoco and talk to them about what they're doing and like what you're doing, and figure out, are there opportunities? Like maybe not tomorrow, but like in a week or two, a year. You like, there's these things that happen, and unless you're like tuned into it, that's just what I think is like, all right, like the place you should be punching the gas always is knowledge. Show up to calls, read things, ask questions, do demos, all those things.
Yeah, we're always in a state of learning, and we've had to learn the hard way, right? We've failed a lot. We've had products that we put out in the market and failed customer trials, but we had to do it because we don't learn without those failures, right? And I think sometimes, and I think problem, with the consumer goods sector is you don't want to put something out that someone's going to complain about, right? Well, I have a flip side to that. We had an email come in through someone who bought one of our customer shoes and said, firstly, thank you for doing this technology. The insole feels great, but I've never cared more about an insole. The fact that it's and we sent that back to the customer. They found us. They took the time to look at Fates is related to Evoco. And we sent it back to the customer like, oh, people care about this stuff, right? Put it in your messaging, put it in your marketing. Tell them if you don't, tell them if you don't want to talk about carbon reduction and LCA because it's too complicated, tell them that some of this is made from plants. You know what I mean? That's interesting to some people. And we think it's interesting to 30 to 40% of the consumer goods market. That's a big chunk of buyers, right? So I feel confident in the future. I know there's sticking points in this industry. It's not happy times. Things are in a state of flux, but I see this impetus coming, right? And I just feel that people should continue to, as you say, educate, but like adopt. The criticality at this point is adopt. Is it a small SKU? Is it, I'm going to put something as simple as a footbed or a sock liner or an insole into this, or, they're going to work with us to build a whole slider, which we're doing right now. So things like that are critical, and we're continuing pushing the boundaries on that. And we'd like to open the door to our colleagues and continue to work with them. I mean, certainly people are out there that can make outsoles that probably make outsoles better than us that we could collaborate on and stuff like that. So I'm very hopeful of where we're going. I believe that the sector is a little bit flat at the moment, but the potential of what we have on the pipeline is massive. And it's about, again, scale and impact and really working with brands to transparently reduce their carbon putback, carbon impact, but also detoxify that material value chain.
What kind of coffee are you drinking today? I know you got a cup in front of you.
Ethiopian organic, fair trade as usual, but our coffee machine's broken here. We have an espresso machine, so I had to go down to the coffee shop down the road just for this. So, but we always make sure that we get the fair trade stuff anyways, because that's important for, small scale agricultural farming around the world outside of North America. And it's a pretty good cup of coffee, I gotta say.
Nice. How much is the cup of coffee now in Canada? What's it running you?
Ooh, this one was probably $3. That's not that bad, actually.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah. So it's if you go to the standard stuff, the bucks, you're always going to pay $5 for a latte and stuff. But sometimes it's nice just to have an espresso or a drip, and that's still affordable.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah, I'm the same. The machine here at my workplace is working, and so I got some of that before I came on because I'm trying to save a little bit of money along the way. But yeah, like I've seen coffee increase a lot in cost. My concern overall in the coffee is just making sure that the farmers are taken care of, that the beans and the crops are taken care of. As we see heat increasing, it's making me very nervous about my whiskey, about my wine, and about my coffee. And I think
there you go. And all of those are being impacted. And look at the France right now, right? I mean, heat, a lot of heat. Those grapes are not growing properly, and a couple of vintages have been.
And I always told people, I was like, listen, like the climate change stuff, you know, whether you believe it or not, something's going to happen, and you're going to be like, oh, like that's actually impacting me. And I typically think it's between wine, whiskey, and coffee, but I think it's like a quality of life thing when you're going out to dinner with your friends and all of a sudden the cost goes up or the quantity goes down and you're like, what am I drinking here, right? So we got to be more aware. And I guess the best way to end this is it starts with us. We work in footwear, and we start with where we're at with what we got. And what we got is some new stuff from Evoco that you guys can start to adopt and put into your product to Jason's point, defossilize what we're doing here to make a bigger difference. And I would also say better product. The innovations that are coming out, the performance is great. So again, I tell people again, hit the gas on learning. Come to the come to the summit in Portland when we're going to be talking about a lot of this stuff. We're going to dive deep into bio, and get into performance issues and get into all sorts of things to help companies think through their strategy and think through how they can do more adoption. And I look forward to seeing you there, Jason, and everybody else who's joined us today as well. Yeah, so for that, cheers, guys. Keep drinking coffee. Hopefully it's good coffee, affordable coffee.
And it's not going to die out anytime soon,
Yeah,
hopefully.
exactly.
That would be
Exactly.
a nightmare for everybody.
Totally. What would we do? Where's the there'd be no productivity. Unbelievable. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.